well as catering for Bloom's Bagel Company and our hosts at the Mill. Thank you. With that, I will turn to our topic today, which is creating a more brain injury-friendly community. And we are so honored to have 5 panelists with us this morning who can share their experiences either having acquired a brain injury or being in the field as practitioners in one way or another. And I'm really going to let you all introduce yourselves. We can pass around mics when needed, but maybe we'll just go, how about starting with you, Nick? And if you want to take a few minutes to kind of share your story as sort of the opener, we'll do that, and then maybe get into some questions to keep the discussion going. So I'll turn it over to our panel. Let's give them a big round of applause.
I'm Nick Philbeck, and I acquired a brain injury when I was 15 years old. I was in a basketball game and going for a loose ball, and I hit head into another player, and my head hit the floor, and from everybody around, they said that it was noticeable that something had happened that was significant, but ultimately I went to the emergency room right afterwards, and my CT scans were normal, all of the testing was normal, so it just seemed like, I hit my head hard, but really no significant harm, and I moved on with my life. And a couple weeks later, I all of a sudden was hit with just the worst headache of my life. My vision got blurry. It was very, very sudden. I was driving with my mom, and at 15, I was a new driver, still preparing to get my license, and having that experience while driving was quite scary for her as well. But that headache didn't go away. And so I went to doctors, and they talked through various things, did a lot of testing, but all those tests kept seeming sort of normal. The things that they could see were normal in terms of the tests, but in terms of the symptoms, I certainly didn't feel normal. And I didn't feel that way for another 6 years before I got any diagnosis that tied the symptoms I was experiencing with the brain injury that had happened. So it was quite a journey to even discover that was connected in some way to the symptoms I was experiencing. I've had various conditions related to that that affect really all systems of my body, and it affected me in various ways at various times. But I was able to connect with the Brain Injury Support Group through Indiana University's Speech and Hearing Clinic when I went there to work on especially clearing some of the brain fog that I had, some of the things that were really challenging me in getting back to some sense of a normal life. And luckily, I connected with Rebecca and her clinicians, and they were able to help me get more toward having some sense of normalcy and some sense of a life that I wanted to have. And I've been really appreciative that she encouraged me to come to the Brain Injury Support Group that they had there. And at first I was thinking, well, I just really want to focus on myself, like I don't need a support group necessarily. But I didn't know that that's what I needed, but I needed that. And I think for a lot of people, it's hard to realize how much of a meaning it can have to have those support people around, and to be able to see people, day to day, month to month, progressing through all these kinds of things. And for all of us, it's very different, but in a way, it kind of normalizes that difference. It normalizes, the experiences that we're having. It helps us really be able to understand what's going on with us in a way that I never could during those 6 years before I even knew that it was related to brain injury. And in the years since, it's definitely helped me understand myself a lot better.
Thank you. Kathleen?
Well, I'm just meeting Nick today, but I can tell he and I are going to have coffee.
That's fantastic.
We're going to be sitting in Polly. My name is Kathleen Weber, and I'll read a little just the bio that I had sent to Jean. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I own and run a small adult day program here in town, and also have a private geriatric counseling practice. I specialize in dementia, and so I know a lot about the brain. I know a little about concussion, and I know a lot more now. On January 4th last year, my life changed, or my husband and I's life changed. I was driving home from work and was hit broadside in the driver's side. I was assessed at the scene and by the trauma team at IU Health Bloomington and released from the ER on concussion protocol. They CT scanned pretty much everything that's connected to me. And I went home, and beginning the next morning, I discovered that I had lost a great deal of my speech, and it quickly became apparent that my balance and my visual focus were affected. So the last 14 months have been filled with rehabilitation, education, a lot of life modification, and some serious emotional and financial anxiety for us as we, move through what does this all look like and how do you maintain a business. I am now diagnosed with something called post-concussion syndrome. So I have some lingering effects. A lot of things have resolved or improved greatly, but I still have some things that are hanging on that require a lot of management, just like any other chronic condition. I'm happy to be here and hope to share some resources. I also have received excellent evaluation and support from IU Speech and Hearing Clinic. I've worked with them in my geriatric social work life for a long time. Never anticipated being a client. And when I started speech therapy about 8 weeks post-concussion, my voice and my ability to communicate is the cornerstone of my professional life, and my speech fluency was 13%. So I had a lot of come back to do, and they really hung in with me. It was a little scary on the front end, I think, for us to see kind of where things were, and they're clearly certainly better now because I'm talking to you. So we can talk more about symptoms and other things as we move forward.
Thank you.
All right.
Maybe we can go to Michelle and then Rebecca and Jean.
Hi, my name is Michelle Hahn. I am a music librarian on campus at IU Bloomington. My story is that I was at a conference in Orlando, Florida, and walked across the street, got hit by a car. That resulted in 2 skull fractures, and Kukachaku, which is shaken baby syndrome. I was 36. So I wasn't exactly a baby, but it's the same when I love telling this part of the story, when your brain sloshes around inside your skull. There are sharp edges inside, so it kind of got sliced and diced a little bit. I was sort of lucky in a weird way, because I would have to be crossing the street near 15 doctors. So I was in the emergency room on the street before the EMTs got there. But I came back to work here in Bloomington, and it was my own college roommate that studied with Dr. Everly put me in touch. So I ended up in speech therapy there. She knows more about that story than I do, really. So a lot of it is my education level and working in higher education that made it a lot easier for me to recover in a lot of ways. My TBI came with PTSD, so I'm dealing with a lot of that too. And had 3 eye surgeries, just went through ankle surgery. There's a lot to it besides just my modified brain. But can talk for hours and hours and tell you all the details of the story. But I don't want to do that. And I'm in for coffee.
Thank you for the introduction.
Good morning. I'm pleased to be asked to be here. My name is Rebecca Everly, and I'm clinical faculty at Indiana speech, language, and cognitive disorders. It was a perfect fit for me. I had worked in the medical arena, up in day treatment programs for individuals with brain injury and neurobehavioral inpatient units up at community hospitals in Indianapolis for 16 years. So I've been collectively privileged to work in this field for the last 36 years now. I truly one of those lucky people that get a job that really gives me a lot of joy and satisfaction. I'm board certified as a specialist in acquired neurogenic disorders at a national level, and that's how I spend my days, is meeting individuals who have some form of acquired neurologic disorders. Because I work at the graduate program at IU, a big part of my job is training future speech-language pathologists, and so the services that I provide are in tandem with those students. I also teach courses at the university in these areas. I teach, my favorite course to teach is the cognitive impairments course. I teach that every fall. It's for the graduate students, and sometimes there are motor speech impairments that come along with this as well. I'm a native of Bloomington. I grew up in Bloomington, and I've lived here my whole life, other than the 16 years I spent up in Indianapolis. And I love Bloomington, and I love serving this community again. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jean Kapler, and I am the local support network leader for the Rehabilitation Hospital of Indiana's Resource Facilitation Program, which is quite a mouthful, especially this early in the morning. What that means is RHI is a rehabilitation hospital located up in Indianapolis, and so if, let's say, after driving, you get in an accident, you have a brain injury, you might stay inpatient down here at Bloomington, IU Health, Bloomington Hospital for a little while. But if you need more extended inpatient rehab, you might transfer up to our hospital, or there are a couple of others in the state. And that's where you're going to get a couple of weeks to a couple of months of really intensive inpatient rehabilitation services. And then you might be discharged to outpatient with some follow-up therapies in your own community. So that's RHI. We do have one program that's statewide that is community-based called Resource Facilitation. And we work specifically with anyone with an acquired brain injury. That means traumatic brain injury, but it could be stroke, it could be a loss of oxygen to the brain through either a heart attack or a drug overdose, you're drowning, any sort of brain injury. Oftentimes that's a barrier to returning to work. And so my program, I go out and do a lot of education of the community, and then as folks have a brain injury or someone's working with a client who has a brain injury, they can contact me. I help them get into Indiana Vocational Rehabilitation Services, which is kind of the starting point for return to work. And then my program specifically gets hired by VR to provide some assessment, a neurovocational evaluation, and then we have a staff person that navigates people to all the services they need, like IU Speech and Hearing here in Bloomington, or they might need counseling. What I love about my job, though, is that I get to focus on going out and doing the education in the community for all the providers that are working with folks with brain injury, and they may have no clue that the client sitting in front of them has had maybe 4 or 5 or 6 brain injuries. That those brain injuries might be contributing to some of the issues that bring them in the door for services. And so I feel good about helping folks get into services to begin with, because so many people are out there, paddling as hard as they can to keep up with their lives, working with a brain injury that's interfering with some things. And sometimes parts of your life starts to fall apart without the right supports. And I think that's something that will come out in our panel. I'll also say I come to this issue of brain injury in a couple of different ways. Back when I was in college, my dad had a pretty significant stroke. And so I actually spent a number of years being one of his caregivers. And he never returned to work after that stroke. And so I had that
one who really saw the potential to have this discussion here today, so thank you for that. Want to ask you a little more about just the scope of this diagnosis. And maybe that's Rebecca, Jean, but locally, maybe Nick, Kathleen, Michelle could talk about what the community of people with this diagnosis is like here.
So maybe I'll start, and I'll point out, y'all have a handout, you either have a black and white one or a pretty one in color.
Got some up here too, so.
It's got some basic information. On the black and white one, there's also a little more detail on mild traumatic brain injury. But, you know, nationally, so as I said, brain injuries include traumatic brain injuries. That's caused by some sort of external force. So, you know, Kathleen getting hit by a car, well, all three have had some traumatic force that shook up their brain and messed with the wiring in the brain. And so that's traumatic brain injury. And then stroke, which is caused by maybe a blood clot in a blood vessel in the brain that cuts off blood flow to everything downstream. And brain cells can die from that. It could be lack of oxygen, which will also kill a brain cell. Variety of ways to get that. It might be even a brain tumor, or the treatment to, you know, the surgery to take that brain tumor out can cause brain injury. It could be exposure to a toxic chemical, carbon monoxide, lead, even chemotherapy can sometimes cause injury to the brain. So even disease processes, meningitis, spiking of really high fever. So lots of ways to get an acquired brain injury. Nationally, about 8.5% of Americans have had some sort of traumatic brain injury. And that includes concussion. I mean, technically, I had a TBI when I got hit in the head with a softball. And I was dazed and stunned for about 15-20 minutes before I could clear my head. So I had a mild concussion. Majority of folks, something like 70% of folks, recover well from a brain injury with no lasting effects. But sometimes even just a concussion can leave people with lasting effects for quite a while. About 5.3 million folks are living with some level of disability due to a brain injury. And so, you know, this is actually way more common than we think, and it affects people in ways that you might not understand, might not even notice. Oftentimes, brain injury is considered the invisible disability because, well, you look fine, you know? And so unless, when you got your brain injury, there were also some physical injuries that leave some sign, oftentimes it's unnoticed. And so we do see providers, mental health centers, addiction treatment centers, bankers, whoever, having folks coming in with brain injuries, and they have no clue that might be, you know, affecting a person's memory or attention. So it's way more common than people think.
Only two things I'd like to add. That was a nice description. Thank you, Jean. Also, I want to indicate, you touched on this. You touched on this somewhat, that there is a large group of individuals that go undiagnosed. You heard in these stories, it took a while to figure out what's going on. And we'll talk perhaps a little later about the consequences of individuals living with undiagnosed brain injuries and the impact on vocational and social and relationship issues. And so that's a huge issue. And I also just want to do a bit of a shout out about our military population. That's probably how some of you may have first been introduced to brain injuries is in the news, the discussions about brain injuries through military service. And those are a different kind of brain injury. Again, these compression blast brain injuries that come from the IEDs and the bombs, it's a whole nother way that the brain is being injured that we're still trying to understand. And also understanding what happens when there's several of these, because unfortunately, I met one individual last year who'd been exposed to 50 explosions, and so he potentially had 50 compression blast brain injuries, and his symptoms, frankly, would be indicative of that. So I think also be aware, because this is not always identified sometimes, the military individuals, they're there to protect America and their team members, and so they tend to not focus on that. And so I want to make sure we are aware of that group of individuals that we're still learning a lot about.
Well, and just to add to that, recently one of our bases was hit in Iraq just a couple of months ago, and I saw the latest figure is over 100 service members sustained brain injuries, and I was really frustrated to hear the president's comments on that's not a real serious injury, it's just a headache, which is completely not accurate. So,
Thank you. What about locally, the community through the support group or services that you've accessed? What's that like around here? Who have you met who you can relate to?
A big part of meeting people who I could relate to was through the Brady support group. And that's actually also how I met Gene. And so, that was a big part of it too, was in the support group. One of the things we often have is people who, can connect us with different service providers, having service providers come in, talk about different services that are available, talk about different things that are going on in other communities or in this community related to all kinds of accessibility for people with brain injuries or just all kinds of things. And so one of the early on meetings that we had, Gene was there, and there were a lot of things that I was going through personally that were not things I could deal with Rebecca. And so I sought out Gene, who at that time was doing some psychological counseling as well. And so I was able to go through that with Gene, and having someone who could understand brain injury, who could then relate with some of the things that I was going through, that was really important to me, to have someone who understood that process, understood some of the things that might be frustrating me, some of the things that might be causing me to feel the ways I was, behave the ways that I was, and who could, be gentle with me about certain things, but also, help me stay on top of that, so that, it wasn't something where, I got frustrated or felt like I couldn't do the things that I wanted to, but could really, kind of be there for me all the way through that. And I think that's an important piece of it too, even having other people who've gone through this, having people around who can, I can talk to about this. That monthly brain injury support group meeting, we're able to see each other each month. We're able to connect, and some people might not make it every month, but we're able to see what kind of progress we're making, what that process is like for each person. And so when we're going through those frustrations and going through things that we might want to talk with a therapist about, it's very therapeutic to also talk about it with that support group, and having those kinds of things around is really, really important, and that it's not something you would necessarily be able to talk with your family or your friends about as well as you could with people who've really gone through this amazingly complex, complicated kind of thing. So yeah, definitely connecting with things through the support group and learning about some of the resources and other people in the community has been huge for me.
So, I'm like Nick. At first, I didn't want to go to the support group because I thought, well, you can't see my injury. And I felt like I would not really fit in there because everybody else would probably be a lot worse, and I would feel really silly being there. So, it's all been a great learning experience. I've learned so much. Like, I was in a coma for a long time, so I couldn't, when I got back, my muscles had atrophied and I couldn't just get up and walk again. Funny stories of that too. But I learned a lot about what the brain does, what it's supposed to do, what it doesn't do, and I learned a lot about what the things were that I was encountering. I'm one of those that I thought speech therapy, I could talk, I didn't need speech therapy, but I learned a whole heck of a lot about what that entails and what they cover, like executive dysfunction and all that. So I learned a lot about it, but having come back, I was also in a wheelchair, and ways that didn't affect me. Places where things weren't inconvenient for me, but they were inconvenient for others. And all of a sudden, they were inconvenient for me too. So I just learned a lot, but I've been able to get in touch with great people and you mentioned that I have PTSD, and one of the hardest parts, I think, locally, is the mental health professionals that don't have knowledge of TBI and PTSD and what effect that has and how it's different from other areas of mental health. And that's, I mean, we're in a college town here, but there's so much interest in supporting military veterans. We have them here, and they've gone through the same kind of things, and they also need those kinds of support. And it's not something that is easily found here without going all the way up to Minneapolis. But it's been really great to meet other people and see how things are similar and how things are different. Expand my understanding of what it is that I'm doing.
Excellent, thank you.
One of the ways, I was just thinking about, Michelle and I are both involved with the City of Bloomington Council for Community Accessibility. I know, Michael, you've been so heavily involved with that, and you've done great work with that group too. And that's another way that we've been able to connect with people who have a variety of disabilities, but there are a lot of people in that group who have had brain injuries. And when Michelle was talking about how she was able to connect with other people who are having similar sort of difficulties, I mean, there are a lot of difficulties that people with brain injury have that would also be the same for people who are aging, for people who have a variety of different disabilities. And so that's been another thing, just connecting with that community and expanding that view, expanding sort of the reach of, people looking at how we can make this community more accessible. I mean, that has huge implications, especially, as we have a population that is getting a lot older and is going to need more and more and more of those things that really, would benefit everyone across the board. And being able to focus on those things and learn about challenges that people have that I never would have thought about. But, going to those meetings and hearing again from other people about things that I would never think about, but there are simple things that I realized I could do to be better toward other people with disabilities, and other people, just making it more welcome for them, even though I've gone through certain things and I know what I want. Being able to hear from them and open up my perspective has been really huge too. So, getting out there in the community in various ways and activities is also connecting me with more people who've had brain injury and didn't know about speech and hearing clinic, didn't know about these other things. And, I went through the same things, but not knowing who to go to deal with brain fog. So I was thinking maybe cognitive therapy. So when I called people about that, they were thinking cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a different kind of thing. And it took me a long time to figure out that, I need a speech and hearing clinic, but speech and hearing aren't really my main issues. You don't realize what speech and hearing clinics really do.
And you can swallow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So a big part of it is just connecting with anyone in the community, getting out there and meeting new people. You realize that all those other things, and you can connect with so many things that you never would have otherwise, especially if you stay kind of in that silo of and just focusing on things related to brain injury.
Yeah, because it sounds like it really has unique challenges in terms of the visibility that you touch upon, and then the lack of awareness, which is why we're here today, and we're going to end on the topic of how can we create a more brain injury friendly community that then also supports other people that are in our community. But I did want to ask if you could just talk for a minute about how your injuries affected different parts of your lives. Because I heard you earlier allude to your marriage and work, family, other aspects of life, and how you had to work with it.
I can speak.
Trifocals.
So I can speak to that a little bit. Was not uncommon for me before the accident to work, 60 plus hours a week. I run a small business, I take care of a lot of folks with dementia that while they attend our program, we also do a lot of support for folks outside the program. People are in the hospital, or caregivers need stuff at home. I mean, it's just, and that is, sometimes that's late at night, sometimes that's weird hours, and I would just kind of text John and be like, hey, I'll see you here or there, and so when we started to see that this concussion was going to make a difference, there's no way that we could have anticipated how many things it would have affected. I figured, a couple weeks of, no electronic devices, sleeping, resting, doing, not doing all the things they said not to do, and, I kind of recover. But really, what we found out is it took about 8 months for me to have enough rehab and recovery to start to work just literally a couple of hours a week. And I'm just now up to a part-time, but with some real management. So it's not like 8 hours one day, take a day off, 8 hours. It's more like my attention and focus really by 5 hours pushes me pretty hard, and I'm pretty exhausted cognitively, not so much physically after that. I mentioned the verbal fluency. It affected my memory early on. My memory's always been okay, and attention and focus was a problem, and that affected my memory as well. I had a condition called nystagmus, which is when I would focus directly on an object or something for reading or whatever, my eyes would continue to wobble back and forth. So I'd focus on a point, but my eyes were kind of googly-eyed, which affected my balance. It affected reading, it affected driving. Email, managing a business, all the things, right, that we do, writing. I spent most of my time in speech therapy or the follow-up homework, occupational therapy, driving rehabilitation, some mental health therapy, and also some additional EMDR for PTSD. Was a big deal, especially when I started driving rehab. Unprotected left turns made me pretty nervous. There were definitely some triggers with some things happening there that were drawing my attention and focus when I was driving, so we needed to pay attention to those. Financially, that was a big hit. So we have, my husband works at IU, and we're very lucky to have pretty good insurance, and our part of the ER bill was $17,000. So that's pretty terrifying, right? When they CT scan your whole body, it racks up pretty quickly. But they had to do that. Did I have internal injuries? What else was going on with me? Did I have a neck injury? These kinds of things. So we were also down to one income pretty rapidly, and work-wise, it put us 18 months to 2 years behind on strategic planning. We were getting ready to level up on some things and make some pretty big changes that we had been working toward for quite a while. And so we lost all of that momentum, and the kind of value in the business to move forward to serve more people over the last 14 months has gotten kind of drained back down, so we're a couple years behind where we would be. So that has been challenging. We made a decision to move. We were in a 2-story house with a half acre of property to manage that had been really a wonderful place, but didn't meet our needs. It then all fell to John to manage everything, and that was not okay, so we made a move to a condominium, which meant in the middle of my rehab and doing everything, my husband was handling you know, grocery shopping, meal planning, picking up a bunch of pieces for the business, and also 90% of helping us, you know, move our house to a new place. So that was a tough decision. I think we think it was the right decision, but it's certainly, my challenges have physically and emotionally been challenging, but I cannot underestimate the challenge to who my mother refers to as St. John. He's really, I have an amazing partner, and so that's another piece of it, right? Without an amazing partner, things would have been very different for me. He has picked up a tremendous amount of the load. I also am very lucky to do the work that I do and to have the resources and the absolute powerhouse of women and social workers in my life, because I was not able to navigate. I'm a really good navigator. I'm a great advocate. I know how systems work. Anybody who's ever worked with me knows that if I have a client that needs something, like the answer no is only a challenge to me, and bring it on, because we're going to get done what needs to get done. And I was not able to employ those skills for myself. I was exhausted. I couldn't focus, and I couldn't think. I was really fuzzy. Making tea and toast at the same time was not possible. I could make hot tea in the morning and then take a nap for a couple of hours, and then I could come back and make some toast. My in-laws started making breakfast casserole for us for months, just because I could get something in the microwave. So early on, Jean came over. We've been friends and colleagues for many, many years, and a couple of other social work colleagues, and Lauren Karcher from IU Speech and Hearing. A friend organized kind of a little intervention, we're going to call it, right, around the dining room table about 4 weeks or so in, and just said, okay, what's working and what's not working. I was able to give them that information, and then they turned from me to John, and they said, so how are you? And I was really grateful for that, for them attending to him. And then they made a list, and we got started. And without that, navigating would have been, I'm going to say, impossible. The one point of contact that I have a great family physician, but this is not his area, right? He's been super supportive, but again, not his area. And so we met with Lindsay, who's the nurse practitioner over the trauma unit at the hospital, and she kind of got us started on a few things. I'll just do a quick list of kind of what I've been doing for rehab and then pass it on to somebody else. So, John, you might have to help me with this. So we did vision therapy with Dr. Connolly at IU School of Optometry for the nystagmus and vision issues. Several people this morning have said, oh, I love your glasses. And I just say thank you. And what's in my mind every time is, thank you. This is like the 5th or 6th pair of $750 glasses in 14 months. Heaven help us. I had occupational therapy at IU on the east side with Rachel Norton, who's amazing, and started the driving evaluation program at the hospital years ago. We worked together for a long time. And with Liz Peterson, who now does the driving rehabilitation. I did about 4.5 months of driving rehab with her. I'm now working with another physical therapist at IU on vestibular balance issues, because balance is one of the lingering problems that I'm having. I'm working with a sleep specialist to rule out central sleep apnea and some lot of concussion-related cognitive fatigue, sleeping, wake, sleeping kinds of issues. I did a neurocognitive group in Indianapolis with a neuropsychologist that was really helpful. Speech and hearing with IU Speech and Hearing. Cannot say enough about that. The cognitive support for both occupational therapy and speech therapy, and the way those things dovetail together probably saved my sanity and also maybe a functional person again. Without those, I would not be sitting here with you today in the shape that I'm in. But also, without all of those people, I wouldn't have found the next right people, right? Because Rachel and Laura knew that I needed Dr. Connolly at IU. Dr. Connolly knew I needed this other thing, you know, so it was kind of patchwork quilting it together, which is what I've always done with dementia. I've always talked to families about how putting a plan together for dementia is a lot like quilting. You know, not one program covers it all for any family. You take a piece from here and a piece from here based on what your unique situation is, and then we put that together in a quilt that hopefully covers a lot of the needs. And it's been like this too, because it's unique for every person. What I have needed has not been the same. So Yoga Nidra has been something that I found that's been remarkably helpful for quieting my brain and rebalancing my sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system so I can rest and get my brain offline. Because it's sometimes I think like it's like having a 2-year-old that gets too tired and then they can't rest and sleep. That's what my brain does. Once I get too tired, then I can't rest. I can't quiet down to actually get to sleep, and then that turns into a cycle that's not good. So those are just some of the things, and I'll pass it on to somebody else.
Yeah, if Michelle or Nick want to talk about how your different aspects of your lives have been affected.
So the biggest change for me is my personality. I tell people now that when I wake up every day, I need a new version of me. So it's getting used to, okay, what's going to be okay, what's going to be the same, what's going to be different. And that's been the hardest, I think, on my family and my coworkers, because, you know, I react differently to everything, so they don't know what to expect, and that's made it really hard on my sister and my dad especially, but also my coworkers, because they all knew me before the accident, and then now they don't know me anymore. So they expect me to react in certain ways to suggestions or work responsibility changes, that kind of thing, and I don't react that way, and then they're very concerned. And rather than understanding that this is just a change and we're all getting used to it, they'd say, well, there's something wrong with Michelle. No, there's not. Michelle's just a different Michelle, 2.0, you call me now. But yeah, a lot of it is just that change in how I interact with the world, that people that have met me since then, they don't know what I was like before, so to them this is just normal. It's my new normal, and it's a new normal for everybody else that's known me before.
That's a theme that comes up so much with everybody in our support group, is that sort of new normal. And that was something that was really difficult for me, especially not having that diagnosis of brain injury or any diagnosis at all that was meaningful to what I was going through for 5 years after my brain injury. And even once there were diagnoses of certain conditions, then it still took another year until they were able to piece together sort of why I was having so many symptoms, figure out that the brain injury was part of that. But in those 5 years that it took toward that, I went through so many doctors, I went through so many things, and then once I was able to get those diagnoses, I was able to see specialists, you know, in various places. And so I was able to see specialists outside the state. I traveled to Iowa, like University of Iowa, University of Chicago, Cleveland Clinic. Cleveland Clinic was actually where they finally figured out a lot of the sort of underlying conditions that I had. And they were able to send me to a super specialist with those conditions, the University of Toledo, who was able to really piece everything together. And I would not have been able to do any of that had I not been able to stay on my mom's health insurance while I was going through all of that. And I've been very, very fortunate to, my mom works for Monroe County, and the county has been gracious enough to allow me to remain independent and remain on her health insurance through all of this, which has been huge for me, especially because it took a really long time for me to become eligible for Medicaid. And and with a brain injury where I couldn't show them a CT scan that would show anything significant. I couldn't show them an MRI that would show what happened in my brain. I couldn't show like these symptoms other than the fact that like doctors had sort of seen that I had those symptoms but couldn't necessarily show a test that showed why I had them. It made it really, really hard to go through those disability processes. So it makes it really hard to convince Medicaid that like I actually need that because I'm disabled. It took 7 years for me to get supplemental security income to be viewed as disabled for purposes of SSI, and now I have worked long enough and paid in enough that I can now get Social Security disability income. But with those processes, I could not have done any of that had it not been for the fact that I was able to live with my parents and they were able to support me during those times. And to have the health insurance that I had to do those things, including going to the speech and hearing clinic and seeing Jean, all those things made a huge, huge difference for me through all of that. And I think that's something that I'm very appreciative for, having those support systems and having some of those things in place so that I was able to go through all of that. I went through vision therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, some of those things multiple times, speech and hearing, psychological therapy, different ways. A lot of different things. And there's no one-stop shop for dealing with brain injury. It's so many different elements of your life that are affected. And so for me, my social life was significantly impacted. I had been going to school, so it happened when I was 15, but I didn't know what was going on. So I had these symptoms, but I still kept going to high school. I graduated high school, went to college for a couple of years, and in college, the last semester I was there, I had a couple of sinus surgeries because I had sinus issues as well, and I thought maybe that was the cause. It wasn't, but I still had surgeries, and so I missed a lot of physical time in class, but I did all of the makeup work for the whole semester. And during finals week, after I'd taken some of my finals, I was called into the assistant dean's office, and they told me that I wasn't physically present in classes enough to pass based on their policies, and so I'd have to take withdrawals from all of my classes, which would have been great if they would have informed me a little earlier about that. So with that policy, it also was really difficult because part of the reason why I wasn't physically present in classes as much is because the university also had a policy for their liability purposes where if people noticed I was having symptoms, like at that time I was going through phases where my doctors call them sort of like spells or things where my eyes would kind of roll around independently of one another. I was unresponsive, so I was conscious, but I wasn't able to respond, so I wasn't able to talk, I wasn't really able to move or engage with people. That would last sometimes 20 seconds, 30 seconds at a time, sometimes as much as maybe 2 minutes. And while it was really scary looking at other people, for me, like I wasn't really worried about it because it happened to me quite a bit. But for the university, anytime anybody around me noticed that, I had to be sent to the emergency room. And so I was doing that, every couple weeks at least. So those kinds of things made it really, really difficult for me to go through that. And so I took a withdrawal from school, thought that I was going to be able to just fix everything in a few months and then come back. But it took a really, really long time to get back to anything that felt normal to me. And I needed all of those different supports to rebuild all those elements of my life. Because when you sort of disconnect from a life that you've known for so long, and all the plans that you made for so long, it takes a lot to rebuild each little component. And one of the main things that I learned going through speech and hearing, going through that therapy, was that I was trying to do things at a level that I knew kind of before, and thought I should just try doing these things that were kind of hard for me and getting frustrated, when I could do like the really simple things and build from the very, very most basic things that felt so ridiculously basic to me. But by doing that and building from there, it helped me get to where I wanted to be within a very short amount of time, where it took me years of frustrations, feeling like, why can't I do this? So really having people around me who were able to help me recognize some of those things I was struggling with, and help me and support me in building from those foundational things in my social life and sort of my work life, in just my cognitive functioning, all of that made a huge, huge difference.
Thank you. Boy, this is like a conversation I think we could sit here and have for hours, and I hope everyone else feels the same way, and maybe when this wraps up, if some of you are available to just have some conversations as we clean up the room, that'd be amazing. It sounds like you, Nick, and Kathleen and Michelle have had some amazing support systems in town and in your home life and work to some extent. So I thought maybe as a closing question, and maybe we can start with Eugene, the topics, how to create a more brain injury friendly community. Do you have one or two points that you would share with us to answer how we might be able to do that?
So from my perspective, what I heard from our panelists is how crucial good supports are. Good insurance, good family supports, the right providers. Unfortunately, there are a lot of folks that don't have those things, don't have insurance, don't even realize they've had a brain injury. They just know their life fell apart after that car wreck, and they haven't been able to get back on track. So I think to truly be a community that is supportive of folks with brain injuries, we all need to be aware, number one, of brain injury in a way that we haven't been in the past. So that if it happens to us or a family member or a neighbor or somebody struggling, to be able to say, hey, let me give you this number. And there's one of the handouts that are resources. I put myself at the top because I can be like the first phone call, because I am familiar with so many of the resources, and I can help funnel folks into the right contacts. And then my program can help with helping people get signed up for insurance and all of those things, getting those supports in place. That will literally save a life, because when people don't have those supports, bad things happen. 50-60% of folks that are homeless have a history of multiple brain injuries. Folks in addiction treatment, folks that are incarcerated, again, 40-60% have a history of brain injury, and it contributes to those additional problems. So support is great.
I think you hit on my primary one too, of public awareness. I welcome being invited to environments like this because there's so little known about brain injury. And to tag on to what Jean said, it truly takes a village. I get referrals, and there's a chunk that I can do, and I can do it very well, but that's not going to deserve the whole picture. And so putting that quilt together and knowing that this is a village affair. And another thing I'd like to add, and I think we touched on a little bit, that access to services is huge. I meet a lot of individuals, for example, that have a depression or an anxiety that is associated with their brain injury, but I can't get them into services because no one will pay for it, and they can't pay for it themselves. And I know that I'm not going to be able to move them forward in the way that they're capable of if I can't get that piece of their symptomatology better managed. And so access to appropriate psychological care, access to transportation. You talked about your friends and husband taking you places, but we see people that have no access, and they're outside of the bus range, or they literally can't afford.
Transportation has been a huge problem even for us. So when I had all that stuff in Indianapolis, I mean,
Yeah.
your friends and family can't take off days at a time for you to go to all of those appointments and all. I mean, it was rough. It was rough, yeah.
So I think access is a huge thing. I think nothing, as a professional, nothing makes me sadder than when I meet an individual and I have a lot of ideas of things that can support them, and I can't help them make it happen. That's where Jean's services come in. There's been a huge gap filled with the start of the Resource Facilitation Project and the role that Jean plays, and so that's helped a lot in our community in the last 5 or 6 years. I remember life before that, and it's much easier now, so it's great.
Any final words, things that would help us be a more brain injury friendly community?
So for everybody that doesn't know, March is Brain Injury Awareness Month. So here's some real stark awareness. My medical costs unadjusted top over $1 million. If I didn't have the insurance, I would be responsible for well over $1 million in medical costs. The adjusted amount, still only down to 6 figures, but not that much. So yeah, that's a huge, huge, huge thing. And just having access and mental health support, specialists that understand the needs or specialize are great, but yeah, that's a huge, huge thing. So,
I wouldn't be a social worker if I didn't talk about stigma. So there's stigma associated with brain injury. There's stigma associated with disability. I spend my days with folks living with dementia. They're incredible. I love them. I have the best work in the world. And if I learned anything about stigma, it's from them. Some of them started out really embarrassed. Some of them still are. And then over time, it's amazing to hear them support one another and say things like, you know, I'm not ashamed. I didn't do anything to deserve this. It's just another thing in life to manage. And some of the most incredible moving support I have gotten is when I finally returned to Better Day Club. I started going for lunch, just going to lunch with the gang, just to see if I could pull that off. And my first day back, 2 of our club members said, come and sit here. They wanted me to sit between them. And then these are people that may not remember by the end of the day what they had for lunch, but they remember each other, right? They remember relationships. And they turned to me, like kind of double teamed me, and they said, where have you been? We want to know about your brain. And I was hesitant because it's not about me, right, in that environment. And I said, well, what do you want to know? Well, we want to know what happened to it, and we want to know how it works. And so I thought, okay, full disclosure or soft shoe it, what am I going to do? And I thought, going through the front door. And so I told them what was working and what wasn't, and I wish you could have heard them. Oh, that's me. Oh, have you tried this? It helps me when that happens. This is what I do. And they were so invested in me, I can't even explain it to you. And so the work that I do has also really saved me in this, because I get to spend time with people doing art therapy and music therapy and speech and language pathology. And we're all, literally when I say we're all in it together, we are all in it together. So I think stigma and I think community are both important, and we can't have community if we're hung up on stigma.
Just really quickly, I wanted to mention that one way that you can also learn more about some of the things related to making this community more accessible for people with a wide variety of disabilities is to get involved with the Council for Community Accessibility. It's an open meeting, usually the last Monday of every month at City Hall from 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. And there are a variety of events going on related to the CCA. You can follow them on various social media. And also there's bowling for brain injury, which I forget the dates and the times on that, but that's coming up in the next couple of weeks. And so if you want to come hang out with people who have brain injury and be able to talk more with us about those things and just have a good time, that's another opportunity.
And all the benefits of that go to the Brain Injury Association of Indiana, to help services.
Do you know the time and date for that?
I believe it's April 17th.
We can be sure to include some of these things in the follow-up email that you'll all receive. And there's also some great resources right over here on the table for you to peruse on your way out. But I wanted to just thank each of our panelists for being here this morning, for sharing with us. What an enlightening discussion. Let's give them a big round of applause. And thank you all for being here. Our next Wake Up with United Way, these are the second Thursdays of each month, is April 9th, and it's on the changing labor market and challenges for today's workers. It'll be a panel that includes some labor leaders in our community, and so we hope to see you there and hope to see you every second Thursday. Please grab some food and coffee on your way out, some materials up here, and once again, thank you so much for waking up with United Way this morning.